I used to show a photograph before I would talk of me with a stethoscope on just to say, I really do practice medicine. Much of what I'm going to talk about is going to sound more like I should be running a spa as opposed to, practicing medicine. But I'm going to explain to you and hopefully give you enough evidence and background as to why a foundation of optimal health that is individualized and not generalized to a patient is really fundamental, not only for preventing disease, but actually for treating disease. And actually, I would argue the worse the disease, the more important it is, not the other way around. Just for disclosures, I'm clearly biased. There's no question about it. For 35 years, my wife and I have focused on developing a model for cancer care, really much because both of us had a number of cancer patients in the family as, when we were much younger. This is our staff. We run a kind of a, small operation, about 20 clinicians all involved between physicians, medical oncologists, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and then a whole slew of specialists in what I would call integrative care. This is what's going on. We're right now in 2012 at 19 million people with cancer globally a year. And by the year 2025, not even 35, we will be at 25 million global people on the planet with new cancers per year, with about 15 million of them dying annually. Now this is a little early and it's not completely fair what I'm about to say, but this was New York Times publication of some National Center health statistics. And it showed what we all know, that cardiac disease dropped in that 55-year window from 1950 to 2005 by 64%. And that was really an education of the public that was done by the medical world. It was impressive, it was knockout. During that same exact window of time, our mortality change in cancer was barely audible. It was less than 5%. Now, there's a number of reasons why the war on cancer hasn't been, successful, and one of them is our system still is topsy-turvy. We focus on disease care and health as an afterthought. We don't really focus on health as a foundation, and I hope to make the argument today pretty clearly that that foundation is sorely lacking and a very big reason why we haven't had the success that we could have. And we know that cancer is not about one track, but rather interconnected growth highways, and that we can't shut down all of these highways. It's a little bit like whack-a-mole. The cancer has the ability to change tracks, and I'll show you some of that today. And to be able to shut down those different tracks, we need a bit different model. That drugs alone would be too costly and too toxic to be used in multiple at the same time. And I love the cancer stem cell story because it kind of rings true to my childhood. I actually grew up in South Florida during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And I used to tell my parents all the time, my father was in politics and a lawyer, and my mother was in real estate, and I said, they're going to blow us up, they're going to kill my dog, but these dang palmetto bugs, these roaches, they'll survive anything. And it turns out, by the way, that these cancer stem cells do exactly like that. 3 to 5% of all cancers are made up of these stem cells. And so far, our approved therapies don't touch it. And we know it's a major reason for replicative immortality and regrowth of disease. I don't do alternative medicine. In fact, as William Dufty, Gloria Swanson's sixth husband, called himself William VI, he basically said, you are an alternative to alternative medicine. And I would actually agree with that. I really believe in conventional medicine as a foundation of care. I just don't think we go far enough. So I don't believe in lieu of mainstream. I really, it's a rule not so favorable. Complementary medicine is really mostly for research purposes. It's single intervention, strategies. Breast cancer with yoga is what the studies look like. Prostate cancer with green tea. I don't believe that these single interventions are going to do much. Even if they show a little bit of data in terms of quality of life, maybe a little bit of improvement, it won't be enough to pay much attention to. My book and our focus has been a systematic model to address systemic disease that is comprehensive, multi-interventional, a whole systems approach with treatment strategies that are individualized based on objective assessments and provide it with a life-affirming communication between patient and doctor. And it's a much broader kind of model of thinking about medicine, and all good medicine should really be that. Now, I'm going to say something really kind of wild, particularly if there's any oncologists in the rooms. People don't die from cancer. It's a myth. People die from complications associated with the disease or with treatment. And those complications actually are often enough preventable if we get patients in super shape regardless of their disease. We all have these symptoms: fatigue, insomnia, bowel problems, et cetera. They affect us if you're a cancer patient, particularly in terms of biochemical disruption, clinical complications, treatment side effects, interference. And that can lead to recurrence, progression, and life-threatening complications that take patients off the planet. If I take that one step further, right, I can now start talking about, well, integrative care, there is research to show it will block every one of these in some aspect. There's research to show that. I'm going to just focus on treatment side effects just to show you that thus, if you believe that a foundation of health and that a patient's performance status, which we all, grade in every single patient that we see, is directly correlated to their survival, and work goes back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s that completely corroborates that still today, then it's hard to ignore the fact that addressing a regimen that improves diet, fitness, stress care, sleep as a foundation couldn't improve overall outcome with patients. Now, the model I'm going to talk about addresses three major areas. This is the first area we talk about in terms of this terrain or soup, biochemical environment, and we intervene with nutrition, physical care, circadian health, biobehavioral. We look at this second area, biochemical environment, the extracellular soup that these cells grow in, and that's things like oxidation, inflammation, glycemia, immune functioning, stress chemistry, coagulopathy, which I'll come back to. And what are really today probably more growth tracks and molecular genomic promotion of disease and proliferation, apoptosis, resistance, angiogenesis, dissemination of disease, and metastases. In this regard, these are the different hallmarks that we came up with in terms of strategy. There's an 11th one here called the microenvironment, and I'm going to talk about these briefly. And these are therapies already that exist in terms of conventional drugs to address each and every one of these hallmarks. So I broke this down as metabolic hallmarks, or what I referred to as the soup or terrain before, the metabolic and biochemical environment. Genomic instability and chronic inflammation are your enablers of cancer. Dysregulated metabolism is glycemia, insulinemia, things that are more mitogenic as opposed to mutagenic, growth stimulating. And immune evasion. The dysregulated immune system is really the last defense to cancer. And then molecular hallmarks in terms of, instead of really metabolic, molecular, sustained proliferation, or because of mutation, your cancer from the membrane of the cell gets a message from each train station along the way leading to the nucleus to tell the DNA to replicate, and you get this simple message that says, instead of as a normal cell, grow, 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 you have a glitch in the system that starts saying grow, 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 kind of a machine gunning of disease. And this is sustained proliferation. And then the ineffectiveness of the brakes, of the stop signal. There's the tumor microenvironment. That's these cells right alongside the edge of the tumor that leads to sprouting like angiogenesis. And we know in all wars that if you cut off the supply lines to the army that you're fighting against, and they can't eat or drink, you don't have to fight them at all. You just have to wait it out. Right? And so that's true for cancer as well. And then this is your really last set of steps in terms of cancer is immune dysregulation, a terrain factor of coagulopathy, and invasion of metastases. There are several reasons. I mentioned cancer stem cells and their ability to bring a cancer back over and over. But if you think of a soccer ball, and you think of BBs filling that entire soccer ball, and you think of 8 different colors of the BBs being painted one of 8 colors, and you come in with a pesticide or whatever, chemical, a chemo, and you knock out, as they're designed to do, one drug, one target, and you knock out one color, what happens is cancers just fill in the spaces. It's just like a garden with weeds. You use a pesticide, and then the other weeds fill it in really quite rapidly. So this is a gentleman, came to us, actually a minister that was under my care for 7 years with renal cancer, with 6 organ sites involved besides the kidneys. He's a cattle farmer in Colorado. It's 1990. And he's told that he has a year to live and nothing can be done for him. He's got lung and lymph metastases. He changed his cattle farm to organic vegetables. I like to say he traded cattle for carrots. Kind of a cute story. But really the more impressive story about this guy is not only he did a full program with us, did interferon, but not particularly all that promising a therapy or strategy for him. And we completely cleared him of lung and lymph metastases from the kidney. This is a woman diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, bone and lymph metastases, 1983. She was told by the surgeons they got it all. She was sent home with no plan. I see her at a recurrence point a couple of years later. She's free of disease. She was a chemist, lives in downtown Chicago, now retired with grandkids. This is the kind of individualizing care, nutritional assessments that we do. We do body composition analysis. So we look at surveys of what the patients have been eating and not eating. We do all kinds of testing of strength, flexibility, aerobic capacity, body composition analysis, rest activity cycling in terms of circadian health. And what we know is just wild in terms of cost of health and eating is that the cheaper the food, the higher its energy concentration or density. So calorically, fat-wise, et cetera. Actually, we package this stuff and it's cheaper than buying fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, just dried foods that could supply the whole earth, the whole earth in terms of food nutritional needs. It's kind of a little wild. This is what the ACS's guidelines are in terms of nutrition and cancer prevention. Achieve and maintain a healthy weight throughout your life, stay lean, and get regular physical activity and limit high caloric intake. It is suggesting 150 minutes of moderate exercise or 75 of vigorous exercise. And if you're a kid, you should be getting about an hour a day. This is kind of the story, and it's the same exact type of studies that you see in cardiac disease. This is a typical Western diet eaten by most Americans, red meat. You all heard about the latest with processed meats, no surprise to some of us. Butter, dairy, high-fat dairy, a sedentary lifestyle, and refined grains. And you can see, in terms of breast cancer, about a 20% increase. There are good carbs, and there are not so good carbs. And anybody tells you that all carbs are bad, which is kind of popping out of the latest pop diet almost by the 2 months or month, a new one comes on the marketplace, has not read any of the literature about glycemia and insulinemia and everything else, that complex carbs and legumes actually stabilize sugar levels. So let's switch to fats and say there are good fats and not so good fats. And I know everybody gets off on grass-fed beef and all of this, but I'm going to tell you that your omega-6s and your saturated fats are pro-inflammatory and pro-oxidative. So they will actually drive disease. All right, our regimen is a rainbow of vegetables, whole cereal grains, and I mean whole, brown rice, barley, oats, I don't mean flour, plant-based proteins, legumes, beans, soy, seeds, nuts, some cold water fish, eggs, preferably omega-3 if you're going to use the yolks, egg whites fine, fruits and berries, limiting your quantity of fats and getting better quality of fats, deep sea fish, seeds, nuts, avocado, walnut, sesame, flax, olive, substituting dairy alternatives, almond milk, soy milk, rice milk, et cetera, and supplementing with whole plant green drinks. Okay, I'm going to switch to exercise quickly and just say that in all of the exercises, I don't care, breast, colon, kidney, prostate, in all cases, the subjects that had higher exercise did better with less progression and less mortality. Now, just 2 quick studies. Breast cancer patients that exercise 3 to 5 hours per week, even speed walking, a stationary bike, what have you, cut mortality by half annually, And colon cancer patients that did 6 to 9 hours per week cut mortality by 61% and recurrence by more than half. So let me just briefly talk about this last section. The question we were asking was, does antioxidants, when given concurrently with chemotherapy, decrease efficacy or prevent cancer cells from cytotoxic effects of chemotherapy? Or does it increase efficacy, reduce toxicity, and protect normal tissue? And I'm just summarizing an enormous amount of work in 2 papers at the same time. First one was published in 2007, Cancer Treatment Reviews, and then the second one in the International Journal of Cancer in 2008. The data showed, in terms of a summary, antioxidants enhanced treatment outcomes, increased survival, increased tumor response, or both, in all but one not statistically significant study. So we only looked at gold standard research. The majority of studies showed antioxidant groups had decreased toxicity. I have tables and tables and tables. I could have given you a 2-hour presentation just on that alone, these papers. No trial reported a significant decrease in treatment efficacy, which suggests there's no evidence of interference. The last thing I'll talk about is Chrono, and I'll show you just one piece of our data. So I mentioned timing of drugs. It's not just what time of day. Every drug has an optimal time of day or night when it's the most effective and the least toxic. So much so that it can reduce toxicity from 25 to 85%, and so much so that it can actually boost the effectiveness of the drug from 25% up to 200%. I'm going to show you an exception. This is an ovarian cancer trial that's a 400% improvement in 5-year survivals. So the drug is given, instead of given as a push or a steady state, even concentration drip, what we're doing is we're sneaking up on the cell, little tiny dosing, and incrementally increasing until it peaks, called the sinusoidal wave, and then mirror imaging it back down again. And by giving drugs that way at the right time, and some drugs should be given in the morning, they're LARCs, some drugs are nighttime drugs, some are afternoon drugs. I didn't do this work, William Reshevsky did this work, literally hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed articles. Started off in animal work, all VA hospital funded, and migrated up to humans. And the data, and it's done actually in Europe, and it's done in the Mideast and Asia. In the US, there were 4 centers, we're the only one that hasn't retired. My bad, but anyhow, so the the problem is that Medicare and insurance doesn't pay you anything for it, so nobody wants to purchase the technology to do it. But the effects are amazing with patients. This is showing right here, the Schedule A is the Chrono group, and Schedule B is the non-Chrono group. This is metastatic ovarian cancer, randomized controlled trial, 50% reduction in complications from treatment, 80% reduction in the need to reduce the dose of the drug or widen the interval in terms of treatment.